Welcome back to Harny Revenge, where we tell true stories of courage, justice, and the strange kind of strength that appears at the very moment you say enough. Today, I bring you a story that will make you question everything you ever believed about family ties and what people call unconditional love. This is the story of Eleanor Pierce. 68 years old, a woman who sacrificed more than 3 decades for her son, only to discover love without boundaries is not love. It is permission. Refusing to permit resound, beginning to respect. And when Eleanor finally reached her limit, she did not simply get revenge, she freed herself. If you have ever been overlooked by the people you love, if you have ever wondered whether you were too generous or too forgiving, this story is for you. Eleanor's journey from a mother who always apologized to a woman who redrew the boundaries will remind you that it is never too late to demand the respect you deserve. Before we begin, if you believe that everyone must be held accountable for their actions, press like. If you want to hear more stories of ordinary people finding extraordinary strength, subscribe and turn on the bell. Your support helps us continue bringing these living testimonies of resilience and justice. And now let us step into the story of Eleanor. My name is Eleanor Pierce, 68 years old, Sarasota, where the Florida sun is always too real and the promises of children are not always the same. The message came at 7:12 in the evening. Mom Lily's birthday this year will be small. I am sure you understand. We want to keep it simple. The final period from Sloan, my daughter-in-law, landed neatly like a lock. No invitation, no address, no mom, please come. Only a polite silence. I set the phone down on the kitchen table, staring into the grain of the wood, darkened by years. The house on Banyan Drive. The house I had given to Evan and Sloan passed through my mind like a signed check, careful trusting and perhaps naive. I drew a long breath, pulled open the drawer beneath the microwave, and took out the manila folder labeled Banyan House, Deed in HOA. Inside was an enhanced life estate deed, what people call a ladybird deed. I underlined the English clause from 2 years ago. Grantor retains the power to convey, mortgage, lease, or otherwise dispose of the property without joinder of the remainder men. In other words, the grantor myself keeps full control during my lifetime. The remainder men only inherit what I choose to leave when I die. I had read it many times, but never before did the words feel so warm in my hands. The phone buzzed again. Martha, my neighbor, sent a link. Is this your kitchen? I clicked. An Airbnb page opened like a slow slap. The photo showed the quartz island I had chosen with care, the Edison lights I had hunted on Black Friday, sales the custom wooden cabinets from a craftsman in Sarasota. The description read mid-century gym near the bay. Perfect for families and weekend getaways. The nightly price appeared in cold numbers. Calendar open request reviews rated at 4.9 stars. I scrolled down and saw Lily, my granddaughter, in a stage casual photo used for marketing perfect home for families with young children. A dry silence dropped heavy in my chest. Not because of money, because of the chair. I had sat at the last chair long enough to know that I am sure you understand truly meant, Mother, do not come. I did not call Sloan. Instead, I captured every detail of the listing, photos, rates, calendar, reviews, host profile, logged the date, time, and URL into a spreadsheet, downloaded the PDF of the HOA CC&Rs, the covenant rules I had paid to print last year. Section 9, Article 3. Line 2, short-term rentals under 30 nights are prohibited. Violation may result in citation fines or suspension of community privileges. I folded the documents, placed them in my tote bag. As I stood my knee, cracked a reminder from my body that years of quiet anger had been waiting here just for a single word enough. The next morning, I met Arthur Luong at his small office behind the Ringling bookshop. He wore a Panama hat, brewed Ethiopian coffee, and opened the Florida statutes as if opening a book of poetry. I handed him the list and the photos and the ladybird deed. Arthur read silently, For about 3 minutes, the silence of a man well accustomed to the polite cruelties of life. Eleanor, he said, placing his finger on the clause I had underlined. In this ladybird, you did not simply give you suspended ownership into the future while present rights remain with you. They may live there, but they cannot commercialize against the CC&Rs. If it has become a short-term rental, we have two paths: cease and desist, based on the HOA bylaws, and notice of enforcement under the ladybird. Both are documents, not slam doors. I do not want noise. We are not noisy. Arthur smiled thin as a hearing transcript. We send letters. We spent another hour drafting together. The cease and desist was clear basis. Section 9.3, CC&Rs, prohibition of short-term rentals under 30 nights. Violation public listing continuous booking calendar, identifiable photographs, demand terminate within 72 hours, remove the listing, confirm by email. Consequence HOA hearing under the bylaws, citation fines, and if continued recommendation to suspend community privileges. Arthur added the final clause in the voice of an attorney who had argued 100 cases. Please note, the property is subject to an enhanced life estate deed, the grantor. Mrs. Eleanor Pierce retains full authority of disposition. Use in violation of residential family conditions may result in execution of transfer rights without the consent of the remainder. Men, I read every word again. Change, please, into require removed. The gentle adjectives replaced hope with request. A document like the cup of coffee Arthur brewed needed to be strong just enough. We printed 3 copies, one to send by certified mail to Evan and Sloan, one to send by email with a PDF attached, one to submit to the HOA as grounds to open the violation file. Arthur said he would CC the HOA president, Mrs. Carver, and the property manager of the community. The HOA will schedule a hearing if they do not cease within 72 hours, Arthur explained. You only need to bring evidence. You do not need to bring tears. Leaving the office, I stopped by the pharmacy to buy a few golden envelopes, the kind with tear-resistant fibers. On the way back, the bay wind brushed my wrist with the thin scent of salt. I parked under an oak tree, opened my phone, and drafted the email to Sloan's subject notice to cease short-term rental and restore residential use. Banyan House, Body Dear, Evan and Sloan, according to the CC&Rs of the HOA Section 9. 3. In pursuant to the Ladybird deed, I require the immediate cessation of short-term rental activity less than 30 nights at Banyan House within 72 hours. Remove all listings and send written confirmation by email. Otherwise, the violation file will be brought to an HOA hearing. At the same time, I will exercise my rights of disposition under the enhanced life estate deed. Sincerely, Eleanor Pierce. I read it again. Not a single reproach, not a single exclamation point. The law does not need to raise its voice. It needs to be clear. That afternoon, I stopped by the HOA office, a room that smelled of printer ink and old carpet. Mrs. Carver greeted me with the nod of someone who had already read every kind of neighborhood drama. I handed her the folder screenshots of the listing printed reviews, booking prices, each page marked with a small timestamp in the corner. Mrs. Carver flipped through, tapped her pen lightly. We will open the violation case immediately. If they do not remove it within 72 hours, I will sign the hearing schedule, prepare the bylaws, and if possible, email correspondence. And if they argue the house was gifted, I asked. She shrugged. The CC&Rs bind whoever occupies. As for your gift, that is a matter between you and the deed. But, she lowered her voice, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly, I have never seen a ladybird deed stand on the side of the recipients. I smiled, not out of malice, but because order began to shine in a simple way, a clause. Back at my rented apartment, I opened the drawer and took out the birthday card I had bought for Lily. I almost wrote "Grandmother will arrive" a little late, then stopped my pen. I sealed the envelope blank, placed it beside the photograph of my mother Margaret standing in front of the town library, her hands holding a stack of oilcloth-covered books. She once told me, "Daughter, when they change the code, you change the clause." That evening, I did not cry. I sent the email printed, The letters went to the post office and mailed the certified mail with return receipt requested to the address of Banyan House. I CC'd Arthur, Mrs. Carver, and the property manager. I marked 72 hours on my calendar and read. When I stepped out of the post office, Sarasota's sky released a thin rain. I shielded my head with the folder, the drops drumming on the paper like someone knocking at a door. I suddenly remembered the Thanksgiving table last year. Sloan had placed me at the children's table for fun. Then I had smiled. Today I did not need to smile. I only needed my chair and a ladybird spreading its wings over the line. Griner retains the power. The next 3 days might be noisy on their side. On my side, it would be the silence of the document, the record, the HOA meeting set on the calendar, the silence of a mother who no longer knocks to be let in, but opens the door with a clause. And on that very threshold, I knew I had just crossed a boundary from endurance to dignity, from the last chair to the chair I had paid for. On the fourth day, my inbox held an email from Mrs. Carver, HOA violation hearing, Banyan House, 10:00 a.m. community meeting room. The last line read, "Please bring all evidence. The involved parties are entitled to speak." I printed the email, clipped it together with the CC&Rs, the Airbnb, listing the booking calendar, and the photographs of my kitchen glowing under a stranger's yellow light. The community meeting room was cool that morning. On the table stood a whiteboard with the word agenda written by hand. I sat on one side, Sloan and Evan on the other. Sloan wore a cream blazer, her hair tied high beside her, a man with thin glasses, a lawyer paid by the hour. Evan stared at his phone, his thumb sliding quickly, avoiding my eyes. Mrs. Carver tapped the small wooden gavel. Case number 14, Banyan House, suspected short-term rental in violation of the CC&Rs. Filing party resident Eleanor Pierce. Named parties Evan and Sloan Whitfield. I stood, handed over the folder. Here are screenshots of the listing, the nightly price, the reviews, the booking calendar, captured at 7:45 p.m. on the date. And here is section 9.3, prohibition of rentals, shorter than 30 nights. Mrs. Carver passed the papers to two board members, each nodding slightly. Then it was Sloan's turn. She smiled politely. Madam board members, the house was gifted. My mother-in-law was very generous. We only lent it to friends for a few weekends, not as a regular commercial activity. I lifted my head. Mrs. Carver tilted her chin toward the screen. This is the Airbnb interface with prices, booking buttons, cancellation policies, and a rating of 4.9 after 17 stays. Do you want the board to believe that is lending? Sloan's lawyer interjected. The CC&Rs are a private document, but in Florida, home sharing still has exceptions. Board member Mr. Hanley switched on the microphone. The CC&Rs of this community have no exceptions. According to bylaws section 5, rentals under 30 nights are a violation. The evidence is present. The air grew heavy as if the meeting room had been sealed with glass. Mrs. Carver turned to the last page. The board is unanimous record. The violation applied the daily fine according to the bylaws effective today until the listing is removed and a corrective plan is submitted. If not complied with, we will suspend access to community amenities and forward the file to the HOA legal counsel for further action. She turned to me. Mrs. Pierce, your documentation is complete. Thank you. Then to Sloan, Mrs. Whitfield, you have 72 hours to remove the listing and confirm in writing. Otherwise, the fines will continue to accumulate. Sloan pressed her lips together but kept her thin smile. We will consider it. After all, the house was gifted, I replied slowly. The ladybird does not gift the key. It gifts the future when I allow it. No one said another word. Mrs. Carver struck the gavel to close the hearing. The silence after the sound of wood hitting the table felt like a declaration. That noon, I received a message from Sloan's mother. For now, I have changed the smart lock code of the house. The environment is tense, and I want stability for Lily. When the HOA matter is resolved, we will talk afterward. I looked at the screen. My hand did not tremble. I took a screenshot of the message and sent it to Arthur. They changed the code. Please record this as an act of obstructing the grantor's access. He called back almost immediately. Eleanor, legally you do not need the code to exercise your rights under the Ladybird, but this is evidence of an uncooperative attitude. I will add it to the attached file. And Lily, do not let them use the child as an emotional shield. We will follow the procedure. That evening, the listing had still not been removed. A new review had even appeared. House near the bay. Host responds quickly. I printed another copy, highlighted in yellow the words, response time within minutes. On paper, the phrase responds quickly looked like a cruel joke. As a mother, I had always responded immediately whenever my child was sick, feverish at night, or late with tuition payments. And now, not even an invitation to a birthday. The next morning, Mrs. Carver sent an email violation not remedied. Fines continue to accrue. The HOA will issue the notice of hearing minutes and statement of fines. I replied with only 2 words received. I did not add a single thank you. Politeness may still be necessary, but dignity is more necessary now. On the 7th day, I borrowed the community center of the neighborhood for a small dinner. Not at Banyan House. I would not reclaim a seat by snatching one. I built a new table. I called the Sarasota Single Mothers Support Center and asked them to pass along invitations. No elaborate decorations, white tablecloths, baby's breath in rinsed glass jars, string lights softly blinking. In the kitchen, I roasted lemon chicken, mashed potatoes, grilled vegetables, and a pot of mac and cheese for the children. When the first guests arrived, women holding their children's hands, eyes still weary, I suddenly realized it had been a long time since I felt people were in the right place. No one asked if I had brought a gift. No one placed me at the children's table. Everyone sat together. I stood, tapped lightly on the rim of my glass. Thank you all for coming. I am Eleanor Pierce. Last week, I was reminded of an old lesson: who sits at the table is decided by who sets the chairs. Tonight, I want to speak about another table, the table of learning. I opened a small box, took out a wooden plaque engraved with the words, the Margaret Fund. My mother's name was Margaret. She was a librarian all her life. She taught me that when people change the lock, you change the clause. But she also taught me something else. Do not wait for someone to invite you to read. Pull your own chair into the library and sit. Tonight, I announced the Margaret Fund micro grants for single mothers in Sarasota childcare money to sit for exams, GED fees, community college tuition, or simply gas money for the month. I begin with my own savings account, and if legal matters unfold as expected, a larger portion will flow here. The room fell silent for a beat. Then applause rose, not loud but firm. A young woman stood, voice timid, Miss Eleanor. I have never sat at a dinner with a tablecloth. Thank you. I smiled, pushed the dish of mac and cheese toward the child beside her. Eat, dear. At this table, everyone has a share. After dinner, I placed a small wooden box by the door, labeled Letters to Margaret. I did not ask for money tonight. I asked for handwritten dreams. I need $300 for fall tuition. I need $50 to print job applications. I need someone to watch my baby 2 afternoons so I can attend an interview. I read each note, folded it. Every dream had its own chair. While clearing the table, my phone vibrated. Evan, I left it. The screen showed missed call, then a short message. Mother, everything is overwhelming. Sloan says you made her feel you pushed us out of the house. I will call tomorrow. I looked at that line as if looking at an 8-year-old boy trying to solve a hard math problem. I wanted to answer Evan. I did not push. I simply stood up, but I did not reply. Tonight was not for defense. Tonight was for new chairs. I ended the evening with a sentence I knew I needed to speak aloud. The Margaret Fund will continue no matter who holds Banyan House next month. Because sometimes the most important chair is not placed in a dining room. It is placed in an exam hall, in an interview room, in a clinic, and in the heart of a woman who decides not to sit in the last seat anymore. When the lights went out, I stood alone in the darkened hall. No kitchen island of mine, no Edison lights of mine, yet this space was mine. I did not need to reclaim every brick to know I had reclaimed my place. Out there, the HOA was still calculating daily fines. The listing still blinked like a late-night lure. Sloan was likely drafting a long email full of reasons. In here, I heard children's laughter, the clink of porcelain plates, and inside me was a new order. I was no longer waiting for anyone to invite me. I set the table, I set the chairs, and I set the name for what I believe in respect. That was my midpoint, the place where the story no longer revolved around the house, but around the person inside the house. And from that point on, anyone who wanted to pull me back to the last seat would have to pass through the claws and the chairs I had just placed for other mothers. On Monday morning, Arthur texted County Court at 9 a.m. Bring the Lady Bird, the HOA minutes, the listing photos. The county records office was as cold as a museum warehouse. Arthur spread each document across the glass counter, speaking softly as if reciting liturgy. Notice of intent to convey, filed under the Enhanced Life Estate. Deed Lady Bird. Grantor Eleanor Pierce retains full power to sell or transfer without the consent of the remainder men. Evan and Sloan, affidavit of violations. Attached with Airbnb screenshots, booking logs, minutes from the HOA hearing, and the CC&R's Section 9.3. List pendens, provisional. A notice of potential dispute concerning the property so that any third party searching the records cannot claim ignorance. The clerk wearing nylon gloves turned the date stamp. Thud. The sound of red ink pressed into paper landed like music in perfect rhythm. Arthur glanced at me. From this moment forward, anyone who tries to mortgage, lease, or transfer rights will run into this seal first. I nodded. Their resistance might come in words. My resistance was just in documents appearing in the right place at the right time. In the afternoon, Arthur sent me a draft of the quiet title complaint, a lawsuit to establish clear ownership held in reserve to be filed if they continued to obstruct Count the Reach, confirmation of the validity of the Lady Bird deed. The grantor retains full power of disposition during her lifetime. Count Senu. Declaration that the misuse of the property, short-term rentals in violation of the CC&Rs, constitutes a breach of the residential conditions agreed upon at the time of conveyance, family occupancy, children, direct lineage. Counter third petition for injunctive relief, prohibiting lock changes, preventing interference with inspections, and requiring the provision of the shared access code. Arthur stated plainly, we have not filed the quiet title yet. We will send the draft along with the notice as a professional warning if they change the locks again or ignore the HOA. I will press the button. I read every sentence, replacing one-word recommendation with requirement. This country runs on words. In the evening at Arthur's office, I signed the codicil to my will. At the top of the page, the bold line interim, no contest stood out. Any beneficiary who files a groundless action to annul, amend, or invalidate this will or trust shall forfeit their right to receive inheritance. I paused with the pen. Arthur cleared his throat softly. Eleanor, I must be honest, Florida does not enforce no contest clauses in wills under FS 732 TORM 51179. But he clicked his pen one sharp. We have two paths, place financial assets into a revocable living trust that elects the governing law of Nevada or Delaware, wherein Terra M provisions may be upheld. For the remainder in Florida, we design incentive bequests they receive only if they do not participate in litigation. If they contest, the inheritance becomes zero. I smiled. So if they want the cake, they must sit still. Exactly, Arthur said, sliding me the letter of intent, a statement of motives, not legally binding, but heavy with meaning. I am not punishing anyone. I am simply refusing to give property to those who do not honor the conditions of kinship. I signed. The pen moved smoothly without resistance. The next morning, the settlement offer rolled out of Arthur's printer, thick as a handbook. Section 1, immediate termination of STR. Remove all listings within 48 hours. Provide proof of removal screenshots, email confirmation. Submit a corrective plan to the HOA and to Eleanor commit to no further short-term rentals. Any guests staying more than 30 nights must be disclosed. Section 2, restorative terms. Provide a shared entry code to Eleanor and the HOA manager updated within 24 hours of any change. Establish a fixed visitation schedule with Lily twice per month. No party may invoke a stressful environment as an excuse to block access. Deliver a written apology for exclusionary conduct. It need not be ornate, only an admission. Section 3, financial and fiduciary responsibility. Pay all HOA fines incurred through the STR operation. Reimburse Eleanor's reasonable attorney's fees as invoiced. Commit not to sell or dispose of personal property within the house, family mementos, photographs, Margaret's journals. Section 4, in the event of refusal, Eleanor shall exercise her conveyance rights under the Ladybird deeds, selling the house or transferring it into a charitable remainder trust CRT in the name of the Margaret Fund under IRC 64. Net proceeds after costs will flow into the CRT annual annuity payments to Eleanor for life. The principal thereafter to the Margaret Fund scholarships for single mothers. Any further disputes shall trigger a quiet title action and request for injunctive relief. Mediation will be offered within 10 days under local court rules. If refused, court costs shall be borne by them. Section 5, Rule 408. This settlement offer is extended pursuant to Federal Rule of Evidence 408. It cannot be used in court as an admission of liability. Even at the edge of litigation, we preserve civility. I read it carefully and made only one change. I struck the word please. At my age, I do not ask for respect. I stipulated. The email left my outbox with 4 carbon copies, Arthur, Mrs. Carver, the HOA counsel, and myself. The certified mail was on its way, the blue receipt slip tucked inside my wallet. I set my countdown 48 hours for removing the listing, 10 days for mediation, 14 days before the notice of intent to convey turned into action. That afternoon, Evan called. On the other end, I heard the breathless sound of a man trying to stand between two shores. Mom Sloan says, "You are threatening to sell the house." "No," I replied calmly. "I am exercising my right to dispose of my house under the terms. I have opened a bridge in the short-term rental share the entry code fixed visitation with Lily. If not, I will sell and let the proceeds flow into scholarships for mothers who have no one to stand for them." Evan was silent for a long time. "And what about me? You will always have me if you need me. As for the house, you will have it when you learn how to keep a seat for someone else." The next morning, the Airbnb listing, in my inbox, a short email from Sloan, temporarily removed pending resolution. "No admission of violation," Mrs. Carver replied in a single dry line that I cherished record and fines calculated through the time of removal. "Submit corrected plan by 5:00 p.m. Friday. Arthur smiled. "They lowered their flag. Good. The next step, mediation. If they try to circle, we press quiet title." I nodded, looking out at the community center parking lot where I had just set a table in the truest sense. In my mind, I saw my mother Margaret turning the red ink stamp of the library, pressing it onto the spine of a borrowed book due date. People who returned late always had reasons, but the due date was still the due date. In the afternoon, I signed the charitable remainder unit rush CRUT for the Margaret Fund. If the house is sold, I receive an annual annuity percentage enough to live in dignity. The remainder after my life belongs to the scholarship. Never a lakeside restaurant, never a cruise ticket. It will be textbooks, exam fees, childcare. Arthur closed his pen. "You have patched every gap, HOA Ladybird. Quiet title, will and trust CRT. They may shout, but the legal map is already drawn." I answered, "I do not want to shout anymore." "No need," he smiled. "The law speaks very clearly." The night alone in my rented apartment, I placed a blank postcard on the table and wrote 4 words to the future reserved for respect, not sent to anyone. I left it there as a marker for myself. If tomorrow they choose the bridge, I will cross. If they choose the stone, I will take another road. Either way, my chair already has a name. And this time the name is carved by a clause. Around 10:00 p.m., the doorbell camera rang. On the screen, headlights swept across the lawn. A rented truck stood across Banyan House. 2 men in baseball caps carried out the washer-dryer, the 2 pendant lamps I had bought at the St. Armand's Antique Market, and the cedar chest of blankets left to me by my mother, Margaret. The door opened with the new code, not the shared one required under the settlement terms. Sloan stood on the porch, arms folded, directing. I did not call Evan. I pressed Arthur's number. They are stripping the house, I said. I will file an emergency motion for temporary injunction under Rule 1.610. He replied, voice calm as if midnight were business hours. Video evidence direct from Ring. I am sending the link. Good. Send screenshots as well. I will request an order to stop removal of fixtures and heirlooms. 40 minutes later, an email from the court clerk pinged temporary injunction granted Judge Morales. No removal of fixtures, chattels, maintain status quo, civil standby permitted. Arthur forwarded it to Mrs. Carver, HOA in the sheriff's office. 15 minutes later, a patrol car pulled quietly up to the porch. The deputy knocked, presenting the order. Sloan argued it is my property, but the deputy pointed to the words fixtures and heirlooms in the order. The washer, the pendant lamps fixtures under Florida law attached and serving the home removal causing damage. The cedar chest and heirloom of sentimental value listed in the settlement appendix. Nothing leaves tonight, ma'am, the deputy said. The court wants everything preserved until the final hearing. Mrs. Carver stood with arms crossed on the porch, saying nothing, only recording the incident. Oh. The sound of the truck's rear door slamming shut was as dry as a page already signed. The Sarasota County courtroom the next morning was filled with sunlight. On the counsel table, Arthur laid out a chain of documents like the map of a year, the Lady Bird deed, enhanced life, estate, the notice of intent to convey, HOA minutes, Airbnb photos, the cease and desist, the email about the lock change, and the emergency injunction from the night before. On the other side, Sloan's attorney arranged a laptop and opened a slide deck, unconditional, give mother-in-law, interference, no binding trust. Judge Morales adjusted her glasses and looked at Arthur. Plaintiff, proceed. Arthur stepped forward, his voice steady. Your Honor, the Lady Bird deed grants the grantor, Mrs. Eleanor Pierce, full lifetime authority, the right to sell conveyor mortgage without joinder of the remainder men. The deed states clearly, with full power and absolute right to convey during lifetime without joinder. Second, the HOA CC&Rs, Section 9.3 prohibits short-term rentals under 30 days. The evidence is here, the listing reviews, booking logs, HOA minutes, and accrued fines. Third, the lock change after the hearing and the attempted removal of fixtures and heirlooms constitute obstruction and waste. The court itself saw this last night. We asked the court, 1, confirm the validity of the Lady Bird deed, 2, grant possession to Mrs. Pierce, 3, permanently enjoin any STR, and 4, order defendants to pay HOA fines and reasonable attorney's fees. Sloan's lawyer rose. Your Honor, this is family tension turned into litigation. The house was a gift. Mrs. Pierce is using paperwork to punish her daughter-in-law. The listing was just friends borrowing the home on weekends. Arthur raised the photos' nightly rates, cancellation policies, 17 posted reviews. Mr. Hanley from the HOA board confirmed repeated violations. Mrs. Carver spoke calmly. We do not adjudicate family disputes. We enforce CC&Rs. Every resident is bound. The judge flipped through the Lady Bird deed, tapping her pen. This instrument is plain. An enhanced life estate in Florida gives the grantor full rights during life. Remainder men have no veto. STR, the evidence cannot be called borrowing. On the attempted removal, the injunction stands and will remain in effect until judgment. She looked at us then at Sloan and Evan. This court does not rule on feelings. It rules on rights. And here the rights belong to Mrs. Pierce. The ruling fell as clean as a tailor's cut. Confirm the validity of the Lady Bird deed. Grant immediate possession to Eleanor Pierce. Permanently enjoin short-term rentals under CC&Rs. Require defendants to pay outstanding HOA fines and part of plaintiff's attorney's fees. Mandate provision of the Common Access Code within 24 hours. Civil standby for turnover within 72 hours. As to furnishing status quo preserved, disputes over removable property to mediation. The gavel struck. The courtroom stirred like a flock of startled birds. I looked at Evan in a fleeting urge to embrace my son, but I stopped. Adults must walk forward on their own. On the third day, I stood in the living room of Banyan House. Sunlight poured through the hanging lamp, still there. The cedar chest, still there. Sloan signed the inventory sheet, her lips pressed tight. Evan held Lily. The little girl looked at me and asked, "Grandma, can I come to your house to read stories?" My heart clenched. "If your mother agrees to the schedule written by the court, then yes," I said, forcing my voice not to shake. Sloan did not answer. She handed the ring of keys to the deputy, and the deputy placed them in my hand. The Common Access Code was changed and synchronized in front of the HOA. No doors slammed, no curses shouted. The law pronounced its part. We pronounced the rest. I did not sell right away. I chose instead to lease the house long-term to a single mother, Danielle Ortiz, a night shift nurse at Memorial Hospital, at a rent below market. The contract was for 24 months with the words "no short-term rental" printed in bold. After expenses, I directed 50% of the rent into the Margaret Fund through the charitable remainder unit trust already in place. The rest was enough for me to live quietly, buy new books, and purchase a chair when I needed one. On the day of signing, Danielle's hand trembled. "Are you certain I could pay a little more?" "I am certain," I smiled. "Just pay on time, read stories to your child on Sunday nights, and take the exam to upgrade your license this year. That will be enough." I stood behind the wooden lectern. The sign, "The Margaret Fund," hung behind me. In the first row sat the mothers I had once invited to dinner at the community center. The first award, I said, $1,200 for Monica's childcare for 3 months so she can complete her GED. $650 for Leanne, the fee for her practical nursing exam. $300 for Tasha for gas and textbooks. As I handed out each envelope, I saw my own reflection in their eyes, the patience and the quiet suffering of women who had forgotten to claim a seat for themselves for far too long. This time I placed the seats, not at a dining table, at the front of a classroom. A year passed. I roasted the turkey, made the cranberry sauce with my own hands, baked the pumpkin pie fragrant with cinnamon. The long table was set inside Banyan House, now a long-term rental, but tonight the dining room belonged to the Margaret Fund, the mothers of few children, Danielle in her scrub top after night shift. Mrs. Carver arrived with pie. Arthur sat nearby sipping tea. At the head of the table was my chair. The door opened. Evan stepped in alone. He stood awkwardly holding a small gift bag, an album of photographs from my youth, its spine repaired, the pages cleaned. "Mom? I found this in the garage," he said. I took it. "Thank you, son." "Mom, I know. I came late." "Better late than never," I replied, inviting him to sit. I did not ask about Sloan. Those questions belonged to another time. At the far end of the table, I had placed a small sign on an empty chair, "Reserved for respect." Now, no one sat in it. It was both memory and warning. The seat was not reserved for bloodline or title. It was reserved for whoever chose respect. When we joined hands to speak the words of gratitude, I heard my mother somewhere in the doorway, her voice as gentle as the turning of paper. "Daughter, when they do not invite you to the table, do not break the door. Carry the claws with you." I smiled. I had carried the claws. I had carried the fund. I had carried the chairs for those pushed aside. That night after the meal ended, I stepped onto the porch. The Sarasota night was still. Banyan House stood behind me like a notarized witness. I did not win by shouting. Yes, I won with mind and with paper. And the best part of every revenge story is when it ceases to be revenge and becomes the restoration of order. Next year, no matter who comes or who goes, the sign on the last chair will still remain. Reserved for respect.